Hi, Chris Tenny-Brittian here for Phillips Theological Seminary. I'm here for the Ministry Training Program's 6th week in the class Spiritual Development. Well, those of you who have been with us for these 6 weeks know, or 5 weeks, starting our 6th week, know that we are reading through Fowler's Stages of Faith. It is an iconic, not merely classic, but a real base, a grounding on faith development. It is just as relevant today as it was, 40 or so years ago. In We're looking at stages 4 and 5 this week, and I have to tell you, I really love these stages. In particular, I had my finger in this, and now I'm thinking I may not be able to find it. I just did. On page 181, it's talking about symbols and how a young man's girlfriend had gone off to college and came back, and they really looked at communion, if she forced him to look at communion in a different way. And at the end of that first paragraph, it says, "A symbol recognized as a symbol is a broken symbol." And I remembered for myself several years ago when the church began not to know the church I believed it to be. And a friend said to me, it is very much like in the Matrix, where Neo is handed, or out before him are two pills, a blue pill and a red pill. And if he eats the one pill, his eyes will be opened, and otherwise he's able to move through life the way he has. I really think that's what we get to experience in stage 4. It's very different. Our faith takes on a whole different way of being. We have a different way of knowing that then continues into stage 5. And I really appreciate then stage 5 and his talking about Miss T and all that she's done and how she really lives her life from this core of her faith. She talks about her life in this core. It's not even as though there's faith and life. They're really coming together in so many different ways. And it made me think again about Kathy Escobar and her Stages of Faith journey, this handout we started with a couple of weeks ago that's been adapted from The Critical Journey by Janet Hagberg and Robert Gulick. We might call it Hagberg and Gulick's model. And how somewhere in these stages 4 and 5, we're seeing stages 3 and maybe that wall, and stage 4, perhaps some of stage 5 in spiritual development phases, in the spiritual development work. We're going to look at that a little more this week, I think, up on the message boards. I also will have for you another book that I pulled off my shelves, Faith Development and Fowler, that was compiled by Dijkstra and Parks. And there are some questions. What they're trying to do is look at Fowler from some different points of view, to ask some questions to, in this one case I'm looking at, it's called Faith Development and Pastoral Diagnosis by Carl Schneider. It's one of the articles in this book, and he's talking about some of the questions that Boissin and some others came up with, and Draper's one of those, asking projective religious questions. I think I'm going to toss a few of those out to you as well in our content questions, because I want you to be looking at where you are in the stages of faith, and then also within Hagberg and Gulick's stages of spiritual development. I want you to be thinking about that, because as we move to our final 2 weeks, well, next week, we're going to be looking at the stages of faith in others' lives, how to help develop faith and spiritual, or how to develop one's spiritual life, spirituality, one's faith with other people, right? So we're going to be doing that with others. That is going to feed into that final project, that final paper as well. So we've got to better identify where we are so that we can talk about that with others and work with others in that. One of the pieces that you may not find refreshing is that Fowler does say there in stage 4 that usually you're in your mid 30s, 40s or so before you start to see this come about. For those of us that are not yet of that age, that may not be too refreshing. Now, we've said this already, that we have to take age out of the conversation, but I want us to be honest about all of our discussion, because here's the reality. Even those of us that are in our 50s and our 60s, our 70s, we may not be a stage 4 or 5 or 6 yet. Fowler himself said this is really kind of a hard phase for him to talk about. He's not even sure if there is such a phase. And so then I had to wonder, is Fowler even, when he wrote this book, was Fowler even at a stage 4 in his faith? I mean, think about that. Now, with mystical thoughts, mystical concepts, mystical experiences, spiritual type experiences, it's very hard to put words to those. If you look do any reading of the Christian mystics, of Julian of Norwich, of who else? St. John of the Cross would be another one. Oh my gosh, Meister Eckhart. If you look at any of those or read them, you can see there's this difficulty they're having to express what they've experienced, to communicate what it is they've learned in these experiences that are mystical. So that may be some of what we're seeing in Fowler. That may be, how do I express, how do I put words, right? Words are symbolic. Well, what are the symbols that I could use, need to use to be able to communicate this, or am I even able to communicate it? Or what I'm hearing him say is this even real? I don't know. Maybe you know. But we'll talk about it more when we get to the discussion forum this week. Have a really great week. I know this still, Fowler is really tough reading. It's really tough this week. I admit that. Make your way through it as much as you can. Write down questions you may have in the reading. Write down ahas. Remember, as you're reading this week, your previous weeks are probably going to start making a lot more sense, or maybe just a little more sense, or maybe you'll just have more questions about that, and that is okay. Here I am reading Fowler again and again and again for all of these years, and items like Miss T are popping out at me. These words about symbols and broken symbols are just jumping out at me, no doubt because that's saying something about where I am right now in my own walks. Questioning, where am I? Where have I been? What more work do I need to do? What might that work need to be? Same questions now I'm asking you. All right, enough. See you on the discussion boards. Bye-bye.